Hey there, welcome back. So today we're going to take a deep dive into the Red Komodo 6K, my new digital cinema camera. We'll talk about top 5 reasons why I got one, who it is for, what it can and cannot do, and then we'll dive into specs as well as full camera walkthrough. Please do check out the time codes in the video description below so that you can jump over into the section you are most interested in. And please note, I'm not a cinematographer or a video expert of any kind. I will, however, try to provide enough detail so that you may get a better understanding of Komodo's capabilities for your needs. Before we dive into all that, let's do a quick check on other worthy camera releases this year. While 2020 sucked on many different levels, when it comes to camera releases, it's arguably been the best year on record. In July, we got the $3,900 insane 8K capable Canon R5, whose specs read like a dream, uncropped 8K video at 30 FPS and 4K at 120 FPS. However, it soon turned into a bit of a nightmare for video-centric shooters due to overheating issues and mostly Canon's marketing department overhyping the video specs of this otherwise absolutely impressive 45 megapixel stills camera. Worthy of mentioning is also their 20 megapixel R6 model, or a baby R5. It is, for some, a more affordable and maybe even a better purchase than an R5 at $2,400. No 8K here, but it can do respectable 4K 422 10-bit at 60 frames per second and Full HD at 120. Panasonic also just announced their Lumix S5, a 24 megapixel mirrorless full-frame digital camera, which is a baby brother of their awesomely great and battle-proven S1H. It can record 4K 420 10-bit at 60 FPS internally or up to 30 FPS in 4:2 mode, has dual native ISO, and has a reported 14 stops of dynamic range. All this for under $2,000 makes for some impressive specs. And then we have the amazing, long-awaited, utterly unexpected, holy grail Sony a7S III, which is so impressive that if there were not already hundreds of awesome reviews about it, and Gerald Undon's technical review, which is really the only one that matters, I would be forced to make one myself. It pretty much has night vision, can do 240 FPS in HD, records internally up to 4K 422 10-bit at 120 frames per second with audio, and can record 16-bit RAW at 60 frames per second to an external recorder like a Ninja 5. It is the king of the hill when it comes to mirrorless digital cameras today. And finally, worthy of mention since Canon R5 did not quite meet the expectations of video shooters is the just announced girthy Canon C70, a Super 35 sensor baby Canon cine camera, their first with an RF lens mount. It comes with Canon's crazy good dual pixel autofocus, 4K 120 FPS recording with audio, and 2K up to 120 FPS. To boot, it also has integrated 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10-stop internal ND filters, ability to record in Canon Log 2 and 3, and with built-in mini XLRs, it is a long-awaited, extremely capable, super portable C300 and C500 baby brother. At $5,000, C70 is a serious contender to Komodo for a lot of people out there. So with all these insanely great cameras, let's see what Red Komodo 6K has to offer and why in the world did I choose it over all the others. Reason number 1. It's a Red digital cinema camera. However, not just any Red. It's a Red that I can actually, though barely, afford. Even if you don't know anything about Red, you may have heard that their cameras, and by cameras I mean camera brains only without any monitor, batteries, media, etc., go from around $15,000 for the entry-level Dragon X 6K Super 35 sensor and all the way up to $54,000 for their Monstro 8K VistaVision model. At this price, these aren't even ready to shoot. You need at least another $2,000 worth of accessories like a monitor, Red-approved media, and a battery before you can even use them. With Komodo, gone are the days of proprietary anything for Red. Batteries are Canon 955 and 975s, just like some of the Canon cine cameras use. Media is a CFS 2.0 card, lens is a new and awesome Canon RF mount, and a decently usable monitor is actually built in. Put on a lens, connect a battery, insert a CFS card, and you're ready to shoot. Reason number 2. clearly define expectations as to what, and by deduction, who this camera is for from the day one. Codenamed Baby Dragon, Daddy Dragon being the $15,000 DSMC2 camera with the Dragon X 6K sensor, Komodo was meant to be something new and fresh from Red since day one. When Red's president Jared Land announced Komodo to the world last year, he did not do it in a PR piece or even on Red's website. Rather, he posted it as a thread on Red's user forums. Unlike most camera announcements nowadays, he did not boast about what the camera is or will have. Rather, he clearly specified what the camera is not and will not have. To quote, "It is not a replacement for the current lineup. It does not have a Dragon, Helium, Gemini, or a Monster-derived sensor. It's a brand new one. It does not have an HDMI port. It has a more pro-ready, capable, and robust 12G SDI. It does not use proprietary media, something very new for Red since their Red-approved SSDs, or MAGs as they are called, do cost an arm and a leg. It is not a module, or in other words, it's a real camera where you can just add batteries, lens, and media and go shoot. It is not going to be under $5,000. It has no XLR ports, but today we know it has a 3.5mm line-in jack. It does not have a fixed lens. It has an arguably industry's best Canon RF mount. Its body does not weigh more than 2 pounds, and it's not larger than 4 inches in any dimension. In other words, it's a 4x4x4 inch cube, which, when I read a year ago, reminded me of Steve Jobs introducing the PowerMac G4 Cube in 2000.
And what we've miniaturized it into is an 8-inch cube. An 8-inch cube.
So, a year later, the only spec he did not meet from the ones he outlined was weight. Komodo is just 0.1 pounds heavier, but that's simply because it grew a cute little external Wi-Fi antenna, which original design in 2019 did not yet have. Komodo can easily be an A-cam for any filmmaker who is trying to get into Red ecosystem at a more affordable price. It is also for documentary filmmakers who do not wish to drag along larger and more imposing cameras like Red DSMC2 lineup or even Canon's C-series like a C200, 300 or 500 series camera. Komodo is actually smaller than even the newly announced Canon C70 I mentioned earlier. It's a perfect camera for placing in remote or hard-to-reach locations, think like top of the tree or in the bushes waiting for a lion to show up or whatever. It's ideal for long-running shoots where remote control capabilities would be useful. It is also for anyone who is willing to understand the limitations of this little guy, even though there are really only a few, which I will talk about later. For most studios and on most sets, Komodo will be a very capable through cinema B camera. As Red color science is, subjectively, really good and easy to match up to ARRI or Canon cinema cameras or any other cinema camera out there, Komodo makes a perfect B cam. It's a great stuntman camera. One can use it as an action cam, crash cam, or a drone cam. It is a GoPro that can actually be used in real feature films with a benefit of footage not falling apart after 20 frames. It is also a great camera to mount on cars and motorcycles for shooting action scenes. That's probably why they are using it on the set of the upcoming Matrix 4 film. Reason number 3, 16-bit RAW recording. Many cameras out there claim they shoot RAW, but they're really shooting in log, where in most cases contrast, saturation, ISO settings, etc. are all baked into the image. While log offers decent amount of room in post to fix and change up the image, log cannot compare to real RAW format where nothing is baked in. Red actually has real RAW files. On Red, your camera sensor receives color information through its photo sites, just like on any other camera, but then the camera uses Red's image processing pipeline, IPP2, to apply a red-white gamut RGB, a color space specifically designed to encompass all colors a Red camera can generate without clipping, and then encodes the image using log3G10, a gamma curve that prevents clipping. While the format is compressed using Red's patented technology, we'll talk about 3 compression modes Komodo offers later, what you get to work with in your files in post-production is true raw data. This means that all camera settings minus aperture and exposure are just metadata on Red. Your ISO, color temperature, white balance, applied LUTs, and any other custom image settings like tint or CDL info are stored in a non-destructive fashion as metadata. You can use it to see the image as shot and as director intended it, but you can also unapply it and start color grading from pure raw image. Komodo shoots this 16-bit raw data internally to a CFast 2.0 card. There is no need for external recorders or even faster and more expensive CF Express card types. A fast CFast 2.0 card will do. While Red has a list of approved ones that work with Komodo, just about any card that has a dual memory chip, 128 GB or larger, should actually work. Being compressed, RedRAW is highly efficient and you can get 1 hour of 6K 17:9 RedRAW in the highest compression LQ mode on a single 512 GB card. In my experience, RedRAW files are much easier on your machine than most other codecs out there. In the latest Apple workflow you can download from Red website, they even added Apple Metal GPU acceleration to speed things up even further. So if you have any newer Mac with AMD GPU and Metal support, you can probably edit 6K files from a Komodo without having to generate proxies. If you want to check out for yourself, I've posted the links in the description below to some RedRAW files I shot on my Komodo so that you can take them through your own workflow. The reason number 4 is global shutter. Komodo camera employs global shutter technology. This means that when the video is being captured, camera exposes all of its sensor pixels in each frame simultaneously, unlike a rolling shutter that exposes lines of pixels, each with a delay, causing image artifacts on fast-moving objects or when panning the camera left to right in a fast motion. You know, the jello effect most cameras have. Komodo has none of that. Its CMOS sensor stores all image data at once. Also, it doesn't suffer from the usual CMOS smear effect, just like its bigger brothers. And finally, reason number 5, dynamic range. Global shutter capabilities usually come at an expense of dynamic range. Dynamic range, in simplest terms, is the contrast ratio between lightest and darkest parts of your image. Not a 100% accurate definition, but the idea is how much of detail can a camera capture in the darkest part of the image while simultaneously capturing the maximum amount of detail in the brightest part of the image. Dynamic range is measured in stops, and as there are different ways of measuring it, camera manufacturers usually pick the one which yields the highest number for their own specs or marketing purposes. For A7S III, Sony claims 15 stops of dynamic range. Though Gerald and Dunn did a real test and has determined Sony A7S III has about 13 stops of usable range when accounting for signal-to-noise ratio of 2. This is actually phenomenal and on par with Canon's C500 Mark II and C300 Mark III, which is cinema-grade level. With Komodo, even though it has a global shutter, which usually costs cameras of this caliber 3 to 5 stops of dynamic range, it is advertised as 16 stops. Until Gerald or someone else puts this to the test, we won't know for sure, but Red is known for not over-exaggerating on specs, so my money is on at least 15, if not full 16 stops as advertised. So those are my 5 reasons why I got the camera. As you can tell, they're mostly technical reasons. As I'm a geek at heart, and you know I love hardware, this is just another type of hardware I like to play with. The non-technical real reason why I got the Komodo is that I would like to become better at making videos, more filmic ones or movie-like ones, not just the YouTube or family videos that I usually make. My reasons do not have to be your reasons or valid reasons at all. Now let's go into specs and look at the Komodo in detail from every single angle. This is the final version of Komodo hardware. Nothing else is going to be changing other than the color. Mine is the special white Stormtrooper semi-limited edition version, but regular production units will be black. Now, while hardware is final, the software we will touch on later is still being worked on and is in beta. Right out of the box, Komodo is this really cute little 2.1 pound Borg minicube. It fits so well in hand and is so light that it doesn't really feel like a camera at all. Of course, once you add batteries, lens, and this incredibly expensive red outrigger handle, which is built out of solid piece of aluminum, it quickly gains a few pounds, but purely out of the box, it's tiny. On the front, we have the lens cap, and inside, a very versatile and arguably best new lens mount available today, a Canon RF mount. If you would like to learn why RF mount is so great, I will leave a link to a very useful article in the description below. Do note that as of yet, while software is still in beta, Komodo does not actually have any support for Canon RF lenses. You can't even manually control the focus on them at this time. Support for RF will come later, and that is why these limited edition pre-mass production units come with a free Canon EF to RF adapter included. You can also use most other EF to RF adapters like Canon's drop-in filter mount adapter. I'm also pretty certain that Canon's brand new 0.71 focal reducer adapter will work just fine with Komodo as soon as it is out, as electronically it should be identical to their other EF to RF adapters. Komodo does support aperture, autofocus, and image stabilization on some EF lenses and can control them electronically. Currently, the list of supported lenses is limited, as you can see, but new lenses will be added over time. People have already tested a good amount of lenses not on this list, and I believe that probably about 65 to 70% of all Canon EF glass works just fine. Inside this lens cap, you will see the heart of Komodo, a slightly larger than Super 35 6K sensor with red color science as well as anti-aliasing low-pass filter. These are non-removable and are part of the sensor itself. To the left and right, you will find two internal audio mics, which are good for scratch audio. In other words, they're not meant to be your primary source of audio. You can use them as last resort backup or for syncing video in post. I had to increase gain on mine to 30 decibels before I could get the usable sound out of them. However, since they are inside the body, they do pick up a low hum of the internal fans. And this little guy here, it's a tally light, which you can enable or disable in software. Do know that Komodo is not weather sealed by any means. You can actually look straight through it from side to side. Through this channel, two incredibly quiet little fans pull air from right to left. If you're worried about hot air blowing on your face when you're shoulder mounting this camera, you're doing it wrong. This camera is not meant for that, but it can come in handy during winter, I suppose. Even though it has fans, unlike other RED cameras, Komodo is extremely quiet. While external microphones won't pick them up, the internal mics will, but then they're really only meant for scratch audio anyways. The fans I mentioned have two speed settings, which I will talk about once we go through the menu system. On the left side, we have this little beep speaker, 3.5mm stereo microphone and headphone jacks, C-Fast LED light, and the media bay door. Do note that the mic jack is really a line in. If using external mics, make sure they provide enough power or you won't be able to hear them in your videos. This right here is the focus plane indicator symbol, and there's another one on the other side. These aren't just semi-precisely painted here. When the sensor is seated into the camera during the assembly process and its X, Y, and Z planes are calibrated, this mark is automatically etched in and the exact distance is stored in the firmware of each individual camera. Komodo does not have any back focus adjustment whatsoever, so don't even try messing with it. The right side of the camera is a bit busier. We have the on-off switch, power LED, Wi-Fi antenna with SMA connector, which you can replace with larger one if you desire, and an oddly placed record start-stop button no one will probably ever use. At the back we have two hot swappable mounts for Canon BP9 series batteries. RED recommends using only genuine Canon BP955 and 975 batteries, and with two of the smaller ones you can expect between 3 and 3.5 hours of runtime. These red colored eject buttons are for releasing each of the batteries. You can also use the 2-pin DC input to power Komodo externally. It accepts anywhere from 7 to 17 volts from external power, like D-tap port on a V-mount battery, or included power adapter, and this LED displays the power status. Pro tip number 1. On Komodo, LEDs serve more than just a dual purpose. DC-in LED has a few different modes. Green means the camera is receiving power or that the battery is fully charged. Amber means camera is trickle charging your BP9 batteries. Yes, Komodo will, though slowly, charge your Canon batteries if you tell it to do so in the settings. It takes about 8 hours or so it's not the most ideal way, but it can do it. If your DC-in LED is red, it means there is an error charging the batteries. Next on the back is a full-size 12G SDI BNC port for SDI monitor connections. It is based on SMPTE ST2082 standard, and it does carry audio in addition to video up to 4K 60 frames per second for external monitoring or recording needs. Lastly, there is a 9-pin extension port which can be used with Komodo expander module from RED. There are other third-party alternatives like a really cool wooden camera B-box which can be mounted into Komodo's right BP9 battery slot. These expander modules provide breakout for GPIO, Genlock, timecode, and wooden camera's option even has a low-power 5-volt USB port. At the bottom, we have a special service port which is not allowed to be opened, and it is probably where the Magic Dragon lives. 2 star marked indentations are alignment points for the optional Komodo expander module I mentioned. All around Komodo there are usable mounting points. At the bottom we have a 1/4 and a 3/8. Left and right side have two M4 mounting holes, and at the top we have four 1/4 mounting points, which most cages, handles, and other OEM and third-party accessories will probably use to some extent. These golden little pogo pins are the accessory port. We do not have much info as to what the pins can be used for, but we know that two of these pins can act as a trigger to start and stop recording, since Red's outrigger handle actually uses them. In one of the YouTube interviews he had, Jared briefly showed up an upcoming, though not yet released,
Komodo Link, which I don't think anybody's really seen before, with the USB port there that connects to the pins, and it opens up not just for the obvious stuff of like dumping off your recording to an external USB-C drive, but you can start using USB Ethernet adapters or connecting devices.
While Komodo will most likely not have the ability to record footage directly to a USB drive, being able to back things up straight from the camera can be useful in a hurry. Last but not the least, at the very top here you can see this gorgeous capacitive touch-enabled LCD screen. It is of very high quality and decent pixel density and is supposedly very durable, as Red does not even recommend adding any screen protectors to it. For those who are a bit scared of scratching it if the camera flips over, the 8-SIN cage for our Komodo seems to have nice little protrusions at the top, which may save you in that situation. To the right of the screen are welcome and very satisfying to use buttons for optional menu navigation. I personally find myself using the buttons more than the touchscreen, as they're really comfy and buttons are in my experience more precise than any touch interface ever made. As a shortcut, pressing the up and down buttons together locks the screen and prevents accidental changes to camera settings. The other are self-explanatory. Menu is the main menu and back button, and select toggles options or confirms dialog boxes in the menus. Pro tip number 2. The CFast Media LED is also quite informative. When it is off, there is no CFast card in the camera. Green means there is more than 10% of space available, which means you're good to go. Slow red flashing means there is between 5 and 10% of space left, and fast red flashing means there's less than 5% available. Here's another one for you. When both power and record LEDs are flashing green, a firmware update is in progress. If you ever see them flashing red, it means that the firmware upgrade failed. Now, let's add that Canon EF to RF adapter and this little 24mm pancake lens I bought only because it color matches the camera so well, and wake this baby dragon up. Okay, and since we are here, a last LED tip. Amber light means camera is booting up. Green light means that camera is on. Flashing amber means camera has 5 to 10 minutes of battery available. And flashing red is a warning that camera has less than 5 minutes of battery available. Solid red, camera is shutting down. Do remember this is a cinema camera. Yes, Canon cinema cameras start up really fast, but others do not. Komodo is not going to win any awards for boot time, and Jared even mentioned that as more features are added, boot time may actually increase a bit. For now, it takes about 25 to 30 seconds to boot up the camera. Once it is up and running, you're greeted with this gorgeous LCD screen. Let's talk for a second about the slightly larger than usual Super 35 6K sensor Komodo has. If we use this chart, which was made by Burke in the Komodo Facebook user group, you can see how the sensor size of Komodo compares to some other ones out there. It is slightly larger than the 6K Blackmagic Pocket Cine camera sensor. However, when speed boosted using the 0.71 focal reducer, it fits right between the Red Gemini and Monstro. Using Phil Holland's awesome Format Compare tool, which I will link below, here's how Komodo's 6K sensor field of view compares to a sensor on a Canon C300 Mark II. As you can see, they're both Super 35, so they're mostly the same thing. Now, here it is compared to a Sony a7S III in full frame 3:2 aspect ratio. However, when Sony shoots 4K UHD video, it does not actually use full frame, so this is how they compare in reality. In this case, we go from 30% larger on the full frame to only 20% larger when compared to 4K UHD. Do note, when shooting in lower than 6K full frame resolutions on Komodo, the image will crop in significantly because Red does not apply any pixel binning or oversampling when recording in Red RAW. So the 6K sensor will crop in 33% when shooting in 4K full frame and 66% when shooting in 2K. While a lot of people will frown upon this is simply how all Red cameras work. Lower resolutions mean you window down on the sensor, but you still read and record every single piece of data in 16 bits from the photo sites. However, due to the crop, you can now record at higher frame rates. This is why we can record 2K at 120 frames per second and 6K can only go as high as 40 on Komodo. Hey, quick interruption in programming. You remember that guy about 25 minutes ago, red t-shirt, looks just like me? He had no idea what he was getting into. It turns out that this Red Komodo deep dive is much longer than he expected, so what I'm going to do right now is cut this video right here, publish it as a part 1 of the series, and then in a day or two you will have a part 2 where we will dive straight into the Komodo menu system and all the options it has and everything else. And I'm actually thinking of doing a part 3 as well, where we can go through the whole Red workflow of getting Red RAW files from here and putting them into Final Cut Pro 10 and grading them maybe and all of that stuff. So without further ado, if you made it this far, thank you so much, you're the best, absolutely rock. Please subscribe and like if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one in a day or two. Thanks for hanging in there and for watching my videos. See you soon.
Wow.